All right, it's time to start painting in the art room, and we're going to talk about some watercolor techniques. Watercolor paint is made with pigment and a water-soluble binder, kind of like honey. And that means that when we take our brush and get some water on it and wet the watercolor, gently going around many times, that binder, that glue that sticks the color to the paper, is going to get activated and we can use it as a paint. So the first technique that you might be very familiar with is just painting with a wet brush on dry paper. Okay. Now the next thing I want to show you requires you to clean your brush really well, because we need mostly as clean water as we can for this. We're going to just wet an area of the paper right here. Now, if you tilt your paper, you can tell that you've got a shiny spot there. That lets you know that it's wet. I'm going to go ahead and get my orange, or if your class has earned the fancy cart, you can use this orange. I'm going to be careful to clean my brush between colors because that looked like it was getting a little dirty. And then if I go ahead and do that same thing, I get a very different effect because the water is causing the colors to kind of blend. You see that there. All right, so I'm going to clean my brush because I'm going to put some yellow down. Here, I'm going to first put paint down across, almost like in a wash where I'm getting it across the whole area. And now I'm going to add the wet paint on top of wet paper, but it's paper that's wet with paint that's already there. So now instead of just blending with the water that's there, it's also blending with the color, the yellow that was already there, giving me like an orangey or a yellowish orange. All right, this next technique is a big favorite. The splatter technique. You want to make sure that you move away from the other artists in your community when you're doing this, because you can ruin their clothes if you're not paying attention and being careful. The best way to do this is hold the brush a little further down and give it a tap, okay? Now, as careful as I'm trying to be, I'm still getting it out in places that I don't want to. It's good to get away and make sure you could even put your paper in a box to really make sure that you're protecting other people from getting them dirty. All right, so here we're gonna try a gradient. Let's get a nice strong purple. I don't know if you're seeing me do that, but I want to go around a few times to make sure that I've got a nice pigment. I can always look at my brush and see, I can tell. And you're going to just put it right on the top and a nice strong coat right there. And then I clean my brush well, give it a little tap on the side because I don't want it to be too wet. And I'm going to drag some water on there to bring that color down, okay? And I might even kind of mix and blend here. You see how that color is coming down. And then to get the effect even more gradual all the way to the bottom, I'm going to bring some water down here again to kind of get to that color to blend further down. So we've got a strong purple slowly going into like a lavender we can barely see. All right, this time I'm going to blend two colors. I'm going to get a little water on here, very little bit. And let's put a nice strong blue at the top. Clean our brush really well. And get a nice bright yellow at the bottom. And I'm going to carefully bring that yellow up to the mid point here. Wash my brush. And I'm going to use that water to kind of blend this in-between area. And you see as we get the blue and yellow together, we're getting a green in between. Now if I see a lot of water is on there already, so I'm gonna wash my brush but not get too much water on it. And you can see how here we have a green that's more bluish. And if we bring that down, we're going to get a green that is more yellowish toward the middle bottom. Okay. That one came out okay, but I think I could do a better job. I gotta try that again in practice. All right, next we're gonna try the plastic wrap technique. That's where you put kind of a block of color down. And it works pretty nicely with like going quick with a nice strong color. And then you're going to get a piece of plastic wrap. Actually, let's get a little skinnier piece. It'll be easier because we want to keep the plastic wrap on that drying paint. So you kind of want to tap it on there and then leave it be. Okay, so we'll let that sit. We want it to dry as long as we can. For this next one, I'm gonna try black. I think it'll get a more dramatic effect. I wanna make sure I have enough water on there. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing. Lay out a block of color. Ooh, and this kind of works nice to make like a galaxy. So then I'm going to take my salt. You really only need a tiniest bit, right? I got some on my finger here and I'm going to sprinkle it. I don't know if you can see that really well, but it's already starting to have a chemical reaction and cause the water and paint to pool in a different way. All right, resist. This is one of my favorites and it's so simple. You can use an oil pastel or a crayon. Just be careful. You're not going to use this kind of oil pastel. It doesn't say it on here. I wish they did, but this one is water soluble. That means it will blend with water. This one is not, okay? It's more oily and greasy. So if I drew a spiral here with the oil pastel, and I'll also do it with the crayon so you can see that both of these work. The oil pastel is a little more oily and greasy, so it might work more dramatically, but they both work. Well, let's get a nice light blue here. And as I paint over these, you can see that that white that I put on the paper is suddenly, seemingly magically, stopping the paint from going in that spot, but really it's science. And you can see that the oil pastel worked a little more strongly than the crayon, but you can see it there. All right, for this next one, I'm gonna go ahead and put down a strong layer of purple. Let me get it a little more. I want a lot of pigment for this technique. I want a strong color here. And I'm actually going to let that dry while I show you the marker blend and the water soluble pastel. And we'll see how that works in a second. So a lot of students are pretty excited when they realize that Crayola markers, or a lot of the markers that we use to draw with, they will blend. So if I do this, and if I work quickly, okay, I can get that blue and green on there, and then I could pick another color that's analogous, close to it on the color wheel, like a lighter green or another blue. And I can kind of come in here, and those colors don't completely pick up, but they will blend slightly. So it's mixing with the green that I already put there, and it gets this kind of interesting effect. Okay, so it's not going to blend completely, but you can get a kind of, you could imagine this could be like nice for like a forest or a tree where you're trying to get a cool texture, maybe a pine tree. And then here we have water soluble pastels. These are really fancy and nice. They will blend. So when I put this down. I do not need to put a lot, okay? That's one of the beginner mistakes, where you think that it's like a regular crayon and you just start coloring like really hard. That kind of wastes it. So I can put that color and maybe a darker teal right here. You see I'm putting very little, but these are very high quality. So when I go to put water on them, they blend so nicely, okay? And that's not all, right? I could get another color that is analogous, like this blue here, and then blend it even further. So that paint is not just showing the color of that paint, it's starting to blend with the water-soluble pastel underneath. So you can get such beautiful colors and blends by using the water-soluble pastels, okay? And another trick you could do is go back with the water-soluble pastel and kind of do some things on top. You can play around with that a little bit. So here you have more space. You can try different things. Maybe you put a little bit of water and then splatter on top of that with just plain water. Oh, and I forgot to show you how you can take clean water and make designs into the paint that has dried up a little bit by just going back and forth with clean water over top. Okay? All right, I hope you have a lot of fun. There's so many things to explore, and your job is to just kind of discover new things and see what kinds of cool textures you can make.